It's a wet and wild dash to the desert coming up next. Welcome to Dash to the Desert on your view. We go from 68 teams to 16 in less than 7 days. Hey everybody, I'm Vin Parise. NBA world champion Scott Williams joins us. And listen, there's surprises all the time when you get to the first week of the tournament. I'm shocked Villanova and Louisville are not moving on to the second weekend. But when you look at a Wisconsin team, once again, seniors, hard not to root for that team. What stuck out the first week for you?
Well, it's the best 4 days in sports, in my opinion. I love the fact that you get these wild, crazy finishes. You get some upsets early on in the tournament. I really think that Xavier team has really surprised me when what they did to Florida State. I mean, they pounded them 91-66. Trayvon blew it, goes for 29 points. I just think that was a phenomenal performance, and with that length that Florida State team has, I'm a little surprised that they didn't do a little bit better.
Yeah, just tremendous job by Chris Mack's Musketeers. We're going to start off looking at the Midwest bracket, and this has been a fun bracket to look at. John Beilein's Michigan Wolverines, one of the hottest teams in the country since that plane crash story, and they just keep on rolling. And at the top, Kansas, Purdue, going to be a big-time matchup. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but first, a team that made a lot of noise out of the Midwest, Dan Hurley's Rhode Island Rams, back into the tournament for nearly 2 decades. Chris DeSano, we bring him in here, our Atlantic 10 expert. Chris, a heartbreaking loss for the community in Kingstown, Rhode Island. But how about those Rams this week?
Yeah, Vin, you're right. My head was pretty much down on this table a few minutes ago, but the Rams have made the Ocean State proud. It was absolutely a heartbreaker. You know, really, they led for about 37 minutes of this game and just tightened up over the final 3 and couldn't close it out.
Hey, Chris, I got to ask you, I mean, obviously Dylan Brooks, the Pac-12 Player of the Year, he got his 19 points, but what was the problem? Why was there no answer for Tyler Dorsey? 27 points, 9 of 10 from the field and 4 of 5 from 3.
Yeah, it was really kind of a frantic game in the second half, and Rhode Island wanted ball handlers out there, so they went small. In addition, Hassan Martin was plagued with foul trouble, and Dorsey was able to use his length and athleticism to really get downhill and get to the rim. That got him going, and then, of course, it frees up spacing, allows you to locate on the perimeter, and really makes the offense run more efficiently. He saw some jump shot opportunities, and to the kid's credit, he knocked them down. Some big-time shots, especially that last one, obviously.
Chris, this is a Rhode Island team that's been a bubble team for the past 2 weeks, and now all of a sudden becomes one of the darlings so far the NCAA Tournament into the round of 32. How's this foundation set up for Dan Hurley's squad moving forward?
Well, it's an incredibly bright future for the Kingston Rams. Dan Hurley started this program with his cornerstone commitments of Hassan Martin, who will be moving on, along with Karan Iverson, and then E.C. Matthews. But Matthews leads a core of guards, Matthews, Jared Terrell, Jarvis Garrett, Jeff Doughton, who's a really nice player, and then Stan Robinson, who was phenomenal tonight, back next year. So this team, with Cyril Langevin, who also played some important minutes in the first half down low, they're going to be forced to be reckoned with and will be the preseason #1 team in the Atlantic 10, especially with the losses to graduation for Dayton and VCU.
Great stuff. Thanks so much. Chris DeSano, our Atlantic 10 insider. And when you look at that Midwest, I mean, the matchup that I think a lot of people are going to be talking about is Bill Self's Kansas Jayhawks against the Purdue Boilermakers. And the big guy inside, Swanigan, one of the best big guys in the country. And here to break this down and really talk about that Jayhawk matchup from Tulsa, Oklahoma, is our friend Mark Ewing out of the Midwest. And it's going to be Kansas, Purdue, Oregon, and Michigan that are moving on next weekend to Kansas City. Mark, what's your take on this one with Swanigan? How did Bill Self's guys handle the big fella inside?
Well, it should be a pretty good matchup. The Kansas Jayhawks are vulnerable inside. That's been their one weak point all year long. But Landon Lucas has really come to play, the redshirt senior, and it should be a pretty good matchup. But Kansas has the perimeter game that perhaps Purdue does not. But keep this in mind, it is in Kansas City. The Jayhawks, who say goodbye to the BOK Center in Tulsa with 100 points against UC Davis, then back that up with 90 in a 20-point win over Michigan State. And the Jayhawks came to play in Tulsa, and the fans came the 220 miles from Lawrence in the Kansas City area to support the Jayhawks here. What Kansas did well during these 2 days or 3 days here in Tulsa is the fact that they shot the ball well, they did what they needed to do, and when they were faced with a crucial juncture when Michigan State was making a rally, Kansas rallied behind its freshman, Josh Jackson, who ends up with 23 points against fellow freshman Miles Bridges, and the Jayhawks get to advance by hitting 8 of their last 10 shots in the ball game, and Kansas was on fire down the stretch, and they made a really, really tight ball game look pretty easy. In fact, it was interesting to note that coming into this ball game, Michigan State had beaten Kansas in 4 of the last 6 times since 2002, 2003, and not many teams have done that against the Jayhawks, so Kansas certainly had the attention of the Michigan State Spartans and vice versa.
Yeah, Mark, I was really watching that basketball game, 40-35 at the half, and as you said, they went nuts offensively down the stretch. They ring up 90 points on the scoreboard, but really was the defense. What is it about that Jayhawk defense when they want to turn it on that they can get stops and control the glass?
Kansas is really good defensively. They'll play a man-to-man defense, and they'll stretch teams to the perimeter. They'll play them right to the three-point stripe, which has been really their characteristic. And in the NCAA tournament, you got to keep this in mind. You may not shoot the ball well every night out, but you can play defense solidly. And if you can do that consistently, you'll win a lot of ball games that you should have lost. Today, Kansas shot very poorly in the first half. In fact, Josh Jackson missed the first 3 shots that he tried, but he kept his defense in it. Kansas limited Michigan State opportunities, and it figures to do the same against Purdue.
Thanks so much, Mark Ewing from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Don't go anywhere. Dash to the Desert is moving right along. We hit the South. When we come back right after this, hope your brackets still look good. Welcome back. Dash to the Desert, Vin Parise, Scott Williams. So as it stands right now in progress, the North Carolina Tar Heels snuck by the Arkansas Razorbacks. They survive. Let's take a look how it looks across the board. Big Ten coming up big. ACC, Big East, not so much, Scott.
Yeah, disappointed in a number of ACC teams. Notre Dame, Florida State, Louisville, Miami, all disappointed. But how about the Big Ten? Wisconsin coming up huge. And I like the Big 12. Everyone was saying they were a little bit down this year in the SEC. 7 wins apiece.
Yeah, let's stay in the South and talk about Greg Marshall's Wichita State Shockers. Our insider, Mark Ewing, he's on location for us in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but we're going to talk South Region and the Wichita State team he knows so well. Mark, you've been a fan of this ball club, and there's been much talked about how Greg Marshall's team probably didn't have the right seed. What were your thoughts against the matchup against John Calipari's Cats?
Well, for only the second time in the history of the NCAA tournament, 2 teams who had 30 wins on the season end up meeting in the first weekend. And hey, deja vu, we had been this way before with Kentucky winning a narrow ball game, but it was a terrific ball game because it featured 11 lead changes. In the end, Wichita State gets a couple of opportunities to win it and actually had 2 3-pointers partially blocked. In the last sequence, particularly a sequence that Wichita State would love to have back again, as Landry Shamet took a 3-pointer that tried to tie it, and just to his right in the corner wide open was Connor Frankamp. He's the former Kansas Jayhawks that shoots over 40% from 3. He was wide open. He never saw the ball. University of Kentucky ends up winning. So as a result, Kentucky advances, and Wichita State again gets a chance to talk about how poorly they were seeded. That has certainly been a buzz topic across the country. And the question will also be, will Greg Marshall be back for another year at Wichita State? He's up for a lot of jobs right now. A lot of conversation will continue. But if he does come back, the Shockers lose only 2 seniors, and those were walk-ons. They'll be back. Maybe next year they'll be seeded correctly.
Yeah, Mark, that was a thriller. I want to talk about another thriller, North Carolina and Arkansas, a team close to my heart, the Tar Heels. They had a double-digit lead in that game. They let it slip away. How did they come back and find a way to get the victory?
Unbelievable, the fact that Arkansas simply came up dry in the last 3.5 minutes. Unbelievable that North Carolina could go on a 12-0 run in the game's most critical situation. But, hey, who does it? North Carolina does that so often. It is unbelievable how they can come back from 5 down with 3 minutes left and win a game really going away. North Carolina advances. Hey, the little things make a difference, and Carolina showed Arkansas that you got to take care of the basketball and you got to get critical shots and you must execute, and the Tar Heels got it done. Hey, you got to be proud of your Tar Heels.
Oh, I'm extremely proud, but I had sweaty palms.
Down. Yeah, he's calmed down. I had to hand him a towel a couple of times. He's calmed down that his Tar Heels have survived. Now, speaking of surviving, the Big East came in with 70% of its league made the NCAA Tournament. Only 2 survived, the Butler Bulldogs and Xavier Musketeers. The other 5 teams have gone home. We bring in Kevin McNamara from the Providence Journal. Let's take a look at the East here. And you see up top, the Wisconsin Badgers move on. Kevin, I got to ask you, coming into this one, when you saw that Villanova could potentially play Wisconsin in the second round, did you think that was going to be a tough matchup, or did you think they would move on to the next weekend?
Definitely thought it was a tough matchup, Vin, no question. You know, obviously the talk around the country, as you guys just mentioned, was that Wichita State was seeded incorrectly. I think Wisconsin was as well. You know, they're the second best team in the Big Ten most of the season, lost in the championship game, and I think we've both seen, you know, in this tournament so far, the champion of the Big Ten, Michigan, and now Wisconsin, both advancing to the Sweet 16. Those teams are really good. I think style-wise, Villanova wanted to grind things out the exact same way as Wisconsin, and down the stretch, Wisconsin executed, and Villanova did not.
Well, Wisconsin's got that experience twice in the Final Four in 2014 and 2015. You look at this bracket now, I mean, with Baylor and Duke and Wisconsin, who do you give the edge to moving forward?
You know, I like Wisconsin. I think they're playing well. They have a lot of confidence. They're going to play Florida. I like their chances against the Gators. I just think the experience, as you mentioned, of Nigel Hayes, Bronson Koenig, those guys know how to make big shots. They didn't get flustered. Villanova had them. About 5 minutes to go. Villanova was in great shape, and yet Josh Hart turned the ball over twice down the stretch, against that Wisconsin pressure defense.
Kevin, I want to go back to the Big East for a sec, because what Chris Mack has done at Xavier, as we know, is terrific. But Chris Holtman's ball club, all right, we know that they swept Villanova throughout the year, but how about this Butler team and how they're built personnel-wise for moving over into next weekend?
Well, even just go back to November and December. This is a team that beat Arizona, that beat Purdue. I mean, they have had a great season with a lot of big-time wins. You look at them, it's tough to get excited by them, but they execute. They have a very balanced attack offensively. Andrew Shravitz, the senior, really stood up big time in the win over Middle Tennessee. Keelan Martin is now their leading scorer. He comes off the bench as a sixth man, really a weapon. That said, really tough matchup with North Carolina. We know that the array of big guys that North Carolina has, that is a weakness for Butler, and I like North Carolina going forward.
Great stuff, Kev. As always, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Well, we're moving right along here. Lots still more to cover here. Dash to the Desert, Vin Parise, Scott Williams. Don't go anywhere, and check out some more predictions from our crew. So how did your bracket look so far? We're back. Dash to the Desert, Vin Parise, Scott Williams. It's now time to take a look at that West region, and there's a ton of college hoop fans in the West that have wanted to see Gonzaga and Arizona all along. Regional weekend still set up. Terrific matchup first with the Zags in West Virginia, and then Sean Miller goes against his old school. That one's going to be fun. We bring in our insider, Adam Finkelstein, and let's really start hitting the West region right now. And Adam joins us on the phone. Adam, when you look at this West and you look at Arizona and Sean Miller, has anything changed from last weekend as to the path of the Cats in this terrific matchup now with the surprising Xavier Musketeers?
Well, I think what's changed is now they're facing an opponent who knows them perhaps better than anyone in the country. Obviously, Chris Mack, Xavier's head coach, is a former Sean Miller assistant at Xavier. These guys remain very close. Their staffs remain very close. So there is, the players are obviously different 8 years later, but there's a lot of continuity and a lot of knowledge about these coaches and what the other one is going to do. So it really changes the way that game planning and strategizing will affect this one.
Yeah, Fink, I got to ask, we go back to that game against St. Mary's. They did a real good job on Trier. Shut him down in that first half. He goes crazy for 14 points in the second half. How was he able to get so free, and will he have to be better from start to finish in this next matchup?
Well, I think the thing about Arizona, it's what we talked about last week. They can beat you in a number of different ways. And to Arizona's credit, when Trier didn't have it going, they got it done in other places. They can play inside out. They've got legit post presence. They can beat you off the bounce as well. And when you do those other sorts of things, it's going to take the defense's attention away from a shot maker like Trier, open things up, and then allow him to get himself going. Because that, to me, is the key. He can score in bunches, but they don't have to be reliant on his offense to win games.
And we're going to bring in one more guest, too, to help us break down this region. From the Providence Journal, Kevin McNamara covers college basketball from coast to coast. K-Mac, thanks for joining us. And what about these Xavier Musketeers? I mean, you cover the Big East very closely. I mean, Chris Mack, this is a team that was living and dying on the bubble less than 2 weeks ago, and now we're talking about them in the Sweet 16.
If they did not get in this tournament, I wouldn't have been shocked, in all honesty, Vin. Had lost 6 in a row without Ednam Summer. They really only had one big-time win when they beat Butler in the Big East tournament. So I'm as surprised as anyone. I'm extremely surprised that they would take it to Florida State like they did. That was a non-game. It was a very impressive effort.
Yeah, K-Mac, Scott Williams here. I got to ask you about that Florida State game, and one of the longest teams in the ACC, yet they go and score 91 points, shooting 55%. How were they able to be so successful on the offensive end?
I think Xavier had 2 goals in that game, is to make some threes, have some open threes, and Kaiser Gates came off the bench and gave him a huge lift with 4 threes. Trevon Blewett had a big-time second half, but Scott, you were a big guy. How do you get out-rebounded 36-33 if you're Florida State in that ball game? That's that really shocked me.
Oh, it was, for sure. And we're going to bring the whole group in now. We're going to have a nice little powwow as a group because we have to talk, and Adam Finkelstein is going to join us back in now. We have to talk about Bob Huggins' West Virginia Mountaineers. I mean, it seems like, I don't know if it's getting to a Tom Izzo and March Michigan State level, but once again, Bob Huggins' West Virginia team, a style like no other called Press Virginia, 40 minutes, baseline to baseline. How far can Hugs' ball club go?
Well, guys, if you remember last week, I was asked who my sleeper was, and I said, hey, whoever wins that Notre Dame-West Virginia game is who I like in the West bracket. And I know there were some people that were skeptical that both teams would make it that far, but I think this is a tough matchup for Gonzaga. They're going to face a type of pressure that you can't simulate in practice. I think they're fortunate that they've got it early next week instead of on just a one-day rest, so they'll have more time to try and prepare for it. But this is a tempo and a depth that they haven't seen so far this year, so it's going to be a big test for Gonzaga.
Yeah, 8 of 14 three-point shooting in that basketball game. So, Javon Carter, 24 points. He goes 4 for 5 behind the line. They get it from a lot of different places.
I agree with Adam wholeheartedly. I think West Virginia can win that game. Gonzaga hasn't seen that type of pressure, certainly in the West Coast Conference, and I think West Virginia also is big and strong enough that they will be able to rebound with Gonzaga. Gonzaga is a very big team, excellent size, not only with Karnowski, but obviously with Collins, the freshman inside, is an impressive player. And Williams Goss makes them go, but I don't think he's seen defenders like Dax Miles and Javon Carter yet this season.
All right, great stuff, guys, and this is moving along. This is going to be a great region, the West. We'll be back right after this. Vin Parise, Scott Williams, the home stretch for Dash of the Desert. We'll be right back. Take a look at some of these predictions. Keeps changing this time of the year. Dash to the Desert. 2 weeks in the books. Hard to believe. Only 2 weeks left. We've gone from 68 teams down to 16 teams, and the march to Glendale continues. I'll tell you what, we're both still alive with
Yes.
Sean Miller in Arizona.
Right.
Have the opportunity to get over the top here and make it to his first Final Four. Purdue is an interesting one to keep. I mean, Swanigan inside, one of the best bigs in the country. If Matt Painter's guys could shoot it from the outside, I think that could break a lot of brackets. What do you got?
Well, I got the bracket bosses. You know, I'm going with Roy Williams, who I think is the best coach in college basketball. He's got 45 wins over the last 15 years in the NCAA tournament. And you know who's second on that list? Bill Self with 35 wins. Those guys know how to get it done in March.
Hard to believe that Carolina pride came out in this show for
Of course,
the home
you
stretch,
knew
my
it
friend.
would have to come out in this show. You know, I'm so excited. I want to host these guys for a steak and bake when they come to the desert.
Arkansas gave them all that they could handle, though. That
It was scary. I had the sweaty palms going on this one. We were texting back and forth. My old Carolina buddies and I were nervous.
They've dried out, though. You're looking good. All right, folks, 2 more weeks. We have you covered. Dash to the Desert. Overtime edition. Yourview.com. If you want some extra topics Scott and I are going to hit on, we'll see you next time here. Dash to the Desert. Vin Parise, Scott Williams. Regional Weekend is next.